And here we go. Hi, folks. You are all here to hear about DeployR because you're excited about it because there's no more MDT boohoo. Um, so 2Point's got the answer for you with shiny DeployR product that is exciting for everybody. Not as exciting as it is for Gary and Mike, who sleep, live, breathe, dream about DeployR. They work in it all the time and they've done some really fun things with it. Uh, they've been doing this OSD, WAS kind of stuff for years. I worked with them at the big bank for years, so that's all they do. Um, and today we're not going to bore you with a ton of slides. This is demo day, so you get to actually see some stuff that's going to hopefully get you aware of what this product can do and get you excited for it. We do have a chat open and we do have Q&A open, and I ask you to blab in the chat, but keep questions in the Q&A side so we're not bouncing back and forth trying to figure out where your questions are. So if you have a question, put that part in the Q&A. We'll try to get to it as it comes. We'll definitely try to have time at the end for full Q&A. But we don't want to really interrupt the demos too much because once you get into them, they get really interesting. We don't want to have to pop out for a different subject. So with that said, I think we should just get going right now. Who starts this? Mike?
Yep. Thanks, Brian. All right. Welcome, everyone. My name is Mike Terrell. I'm a principal engineer here at 2Pint Software. And today we're going to talk about getting started with DeployR. So want to do a couple things first, though, is just cover off, like, if you're interested in DeployR, where to go, things like that. And then we'll kind of go into some of the details of once it's up and running. So like Brian says, if you got questions, put them in the Q&A, not in the chat, so that we can track them appropriately. So with that, interested in DeployR, I'll show you exactly where you need to go here. So you want to head on over to 2pointsoftware.com, and just below the top banner here, you're going to see that DeployR is now released. We did a release end of last year. And what you can do is go ahead and click on this link here, say contact us for an evaluation, fill out this form, and then you should be good to go and hear back from us shortly after doing so. Another thing you can do is actually head on over to our YouTube channel, where we've actually done some quite a few videos. In fact, Andreas and Michael did one just in December, right before Christmas, on Ask Me Anything on DeployR, so that's definitely worth checking out. We do have a couple playlists here in terms of what to do to get DeployR up and running as well. So once you've actually got it in your hands, exactly what do you need to do to get it going? So I highly recommend checking all this out. And these are pretty much geared towards the MDT replacement scenario, because we know that that's been kind of a top interest with DeployR. And then lastly, we have everything documented in our documentation site, which is open to anyone. So you can head over, check out the DeployR documentation, and Gary's going to kind of go touch a little bit on this in a bit. So with that, yeah, let me switch back here. Okay, so the first thing we want to highlight is this is something that Andreas and Michael brought up in the Ask Me Anything, is we're going to talk a little bit about StyleR and PlatformR. And the reason why I want to mention it in this webinar is because the DeployR console sits within the Stifler dashboard. So no need to be confused on that, but we are moving over to a PlatformR platform, basically, where the products are actually going to fit in nicely from there. But from today, you're going to see it actually in the dashboard itself. All right, so once we have Stifler up and running, so we've actually just gone ahead and installed this. You're not going to see a whole lot. You're going to hit here at the landing screen, and you won't see much information in here. But if you navigate down under deployments here, you will see the DeployR node right here. And this is where we have 4 other nodes that basically contain everything that you're going to do within DeployR. So the first thing we have here are task sequences. So everybody's pretty familiar with task sequences if you're coming from MDT or Config Manager OSD. So this is where you're going to come and create, edit, modify your task sequences. We have also step definitions. So DeployR has been built as a highly extensible platform, meaning these are the step definitions that come out of the box with the product. However, you can create your own step definitions to use within a task sequence yourself. So if there's something that you do over and over and over again, and you want to create a custom step for it, by all means, you can come in here and do that. You can also see exactly what's involved in a step definition. So if we like the format disk step, for example, we see exactly what it's actually doing, and it's calling a format PS1 PowerShell script behind the scenes. So it's easy enough to go in and look and see what that PowerShell script is actually doing. For content items, these are any piece of content that you're going to use throughout the process. And we have a couple different types to choose from. So if I just put in a quick demo, we have operating system, application, driver pack, and other. For operating system, you're going to install, load and install.wim that you're going to use to deploy. For application, these might be applications that you want to install during the task sequence, just like you would with MDT or OSD. Same goes for driver packs, although we do some really nice driver pack matching that we'll get into in a bit. And then other is if you just have an other content item where you're referencing scripts, tools, or utilities, you can create a content item for those as well. So it's nice and simple. And lastly, we have boot images. So in here, most people are going to be used to a Windows PE boot image. This is where we'll go ahead and generate the boot image that DeployR needs to get things up and running. And we got some demos later on where we're going to actually talk about some of these. For Windows recovery environment, we also get a lot of requests to be able to do OSD over Wi-Fi. And Windows PE doesn't have the Wi-Fi networking stack built into it, but WinRE does. So if we actually point to a WinRE image, we'll go ahead and use that. And if you have the Wi-Fi drivers in the driver pack, then those will go ahead and get injected for you. So pretty straightforward here. And that's the overview of the console. So pretty simple. It's pretty intuitive. We tried to make it pretty intuitive, especially if you're coming from those other platforms, and make it easy for you to kind of get up and running and migrate things over. So okay, so we're getting into now DeployR is installed. Now what? This is something that we've been doing lots of improvements on over the last couple months. We actually started the DeployR preview program last summer, where we worked with a half a dozen customers to start with, and then expanded that drastically. And so we've learned a lot of things over the last half a year or so in terms of making it easy for people to actually get up and running. So what we want to do is go through, and once you get your hands on this, you're going to be like, what do I do next? And that's what our goal is, to basically, we want to make sure that you can get up and running as quickly as possible. So let me switch back over here to the demo. That should be the last switch for a little bit. So the first thing that we want to look at is everything's controlled in what we call config editors. So at a very minimum, you're going to have the Stifler server and DeployR and Stifler dashboard as well. But we're going to come here to configure DeployR, and this is going to bring up all of our settings that we can do for DeployR. Now, when you first install DeployR, it's going to put the content location in program data. However, with OSD content, you know that it actually gets very large. So we do recommend having an extra disk in there so you don't actually fill up the OS disk. And it's really simple to actually move that content location. So if you come in after installing, the very first thing you want to do is change this to a different drive. It's going to go ahead and populate those contents in that directory. The directory doesn't even need to be pre-created or anything like that, but this is first step that you want to do. This actually came up with one of our customers as they said they would do that later, and then the next thing we know that they filled up the OS disk and things didn't work out so well, so they had to move the content over. So this is step number one of things that you want to do. As you might have noticed up here in the dashboard, everything is HTTPS based. So the very first thing we want to do is actually create a content item for our root certificates. So what we also recommend is coming in and creating a what I call a source repository. So it's not like a config manager where it keeps a direct reference of the content items that you actually upload into DeployR. So I'd recommend creating a repository so that you can easily re-upload or make changes and have a nice structure for that. So in this particular example, I've got one for my roots CAs, and I can see that I want to be able to inject, this would be the 2pixie self-signed cert that we're going to use for this particular instance. And I also do a lot of stuff with my Monster lab, so I'm going to go ahead and add that in there as well. So what I'm going to do here is come to content items, and we'll give it a name. So we can call it root certs. This purpose is going to be other. The type is going to be a folder. So you notice we have single file option, we have folder option, and external URL option. So this particular case, we want to use a folder because we have multiple files. And then very simply, we're going to say open after creation, hit save. This creates a shell for the content item. And the next thing we need to do is actually create a version for this. So by clicking on version, we can add a description if we want, or we can just go ahead and hit save. And that creates version 1 of this particular content item. Now notice that it says in development here, and we want to go ahead and choose a file to upload. So if we come here, I'm already on my folder for root CAs. And if I click upload here and then upload here, and then one more time upload, it sees that we've got the CA-CRT and the rootca.car file. We can go ahead and click upload all, and that creates the content item. Now, what you're going to notice here is a relative path. Anything that's in the folder structure, DeployR is going to go ahead and actually whim the contents. Because we have one single file to download and distribute versus multiple files. WIMs are also single instanced, and they do dedupe really nicely for branch cache, which DeployR uses out of the box. So very simply, we've got our content for this, and now if we want to go ahead and change this to be active instead of in development, we just go ahead and click edit one more time, change this to active. If you had something that you wanted to deprecate, you can come in and change it to deprecate it as well, or you can change something from active back into in development if you want that also. So by clicking save, we've now created our first content item, and if we go back to our content item list, we can see that right here. So that's our first content item. The next thing we need to do is create a driver pack for Windows PE before we can create our boot image. So let's just go ahead and put in WinPE x64 driver pack. I say x64 because we also do support ARM as well. And the purpose for this is going to be a driver pack, and the type, once again, is going to be a folder. I can add some tags if I want to, and now I go ahead and open this after creation. This creates the shell, like I said. We'll go ahead and create a version. Now, what we're going to notice here on a driver pack, we have the ability to specify a manufacturer and model field. Since this is Windows PE, we don't need to specify this information because we're not going to do any matching on make or model here. These will come into play when we're creating individual driver packs for specific makes and models. So we'll go ahead and hit save. Same thing, we're going to say choose file, even though it's a folder in this particular case. And we'll go to our drivers, our x64, and WinPE. Now, let's take a look at what's in that. So this is going to be exactly the same as your driver pack, WinPE driver pack for MDT or Configuration Manager. If we go into drivers here, you're going to notice that I kind of keep mine organized. So I have a bunch of different drivers. I have some for Microsoft Surface. So these are all my Surface drivers. And these are already expanded out. So just like you would for OSD or MDT. So if you do download a driver cab file from one of the OEMs like Dell, you want to make sure that you've gone ahead and expanded that as well. So that's the driver pack that we're going to go ahead and upload. So I'll point to that directory, click on upload here, upload one more time. It's going to read in all these drivers, and then I'm going to go ahead and say upload all, and it's going to go through, grab everything, and put it into a WIM file as well. Also, the beauty of this is you can have multiple tabs going at the same time. If we wanted to click on something else, we could go ahead and open multiple browser tabs to be in different parts of the console, which is kind of nice because then you're not having to go back and forth. But that was quick enough. So let's go ahead and click edit here and set this to active, and we'll go ahead and hit save. Now that we've created our root certs content item and our WinPE driver pack, now it's time to create our boot image. Now this one I've actually already generated, but I've cleared these out just for this demo purposes. So for the certificate, we want to go ahead and click on select here, and we see our root certs down here in the content items. We want to select the version 1 that we created and hit select again. And for the drivers, same thing. We see our WinPE x64 driver pack here. So we'll go ahead and select that, select version 1. And now that's the bare minimum that we need to do to generate a working boot image for DeployR. So this is going to go ahead and create a base WinPE version. Then it's going to create a DeployR specific WinPE version. So it's going to inject all the necessary prereqs before it injects all the DeployR specific components. The documentation actually does have a definition between generate and regenerate. Whenever you do upgrade DeployR to a next version, I highly recommend just going ahead and regenerating your boot images. But where we can see that path to find these is in our content boot WinPE AMD 64 folder. So let's see what that looks like here. Since I've already generated this, we'll go ahead and enter our DeployR, and we see our content folder. So this is where all DeployR content lives. And you might have noticed some of these GUIDs that get generated. So we see a boot folder here, and this is where our boot images get generated. So I talked about the WinPE base that gets generated first before it actually creates the DeployR specific WinPE boot image. What we also do is we generate 2 ISOs per boot image type. We create one that has a no prompt, just means that you don't have to press any key to boot from CD or DVD. And this is very useful for testing DeployR out on virtual machines as well. The other thing that you can do is you can take this ISO and easily create a USB flash drive if that's your preference. So if you do have 2Pixie server installed on the same server as DeployR. DeployR is going to go ahead and copy that boot image into our directory structure for 2Pixie, and the install guides actually have information in here on what you need to do to just, we have a script file for DeployR PS1, but it's going to go ahead and actually copy that over every time that you generate it or regenerate it. So there's nothing you actually need to do on the iPixie side of things as well. So once again, very handy. We're trying to make OSD as easy as possible for everyone. Okay, and the last thing that I want to cover before I hand it off to my colleague is creating a regular driver pack. But since I've already created one, what I'm going to do is go ahead and actually just show what I mean by this. So just like the Windows PE driver pack, I've just pointed to my source for this. And if we go back to my repository, this also needs to be expanded ahead of time. So if we go into x64 WinPE, I've only got one in here, which is my Optiplex Micro. And this just happens to be the cab file that I downloaded from Dell. And it has, I expanded it out so we see all the drivers for this particular model here. Now, when I go to upload it, it's going to go ahead and basically reassemble all this into a WIM file. Once again, we'd rather distribute one large file than tens, hundreds, or thousands of tiny files because that slows things down. But we can see the relative path of where it puts that item, and we can also see the content size of that corresponding WIM file. Now, the other thing that I mentioned was the manufacturer and model. As long as you put this information in, we will attempt to do automatic driver matching on that. I think Gary might have it in his demo later, but we do have a step called install drivers, and this is going to dynamically match anything that you've automatically put in here. So you don't necessarily need to create tens or maybe 100 different driver pack steps for each model with conditions on them. We do that for you in the background. So with that, I think it's now time to turn it over to Gary, and he's going to talk about creating Windows 11 content items.
All right. Thanks, Mike. Yeah, so I just wanted to jump on one more thing that Mike was just finishing up on. So on those driver packs, I've got one here for my Dell. Now, he was using the model name. I like to use the model alias. So DeployR will work with either the model name, which has to be exact, or the alias, and I find it easier just to get the 4-digit code for each device. So when I'm importing things in for my driver packs, I'll use the model, the system alias, not the model alias, but the system alias instead of the model name. So that way I find it easier to track things down and get it precise. You can do like an inventory and get those, and then from Dell you can find the driver packs. So I just created this one yesterday. I've got a script in my lab where it will scan Dell, find all the driver packs, and then just build it right on the server for me. And if we get time, we can go into that, but we'll have future webinars where we talk more about some advanced things. And
sorry to interrupt. Some people saying it's too small to see the screen. Is there any way to enlarge it?
Yep, I can zoom in here.
Thank you.
All right. Yeah, no problem. All right. So, but what we were going to talk about now is creating a Windows 11 content item. So I've already got a lot of different, this is my main lab that I use every day. So I've already got a lot of stuff in here. So we're going to go ahead and create a new Windows 11 25 H2. We'll just call it that. All right, so this will be the purpose of operating system. The type will be a single file versus a folder. You always want to use a single file when you have a WIM. And then we'll just do the open after creation. All right, so it created this blank shell for me. So I've already downloaded the ISO a little bit earlier. and I've opened it in Explorer, so it's mounted right now. So I'm going to go over to my sources, and so that will be the install WIM. So I'm going to go ahead and copy that path, and I'll come back up here and do new version. In development, I'll hit save. I'll choose a file. I'll paste that in, open, and then we're going to go ahead and click upload. And it hopefully won't take too long here. But as Mike was saying, that's the beauty of it being in a web. We can go ahead and open more tabs and keep working while that's running. So I'm going to show you what I've done in the past for this 25 H2. So I like to keep, what I end up doing is every month I'll go in and I'll add a new one. So like my version 1 is from September, and then I missed a couple months, and then my version 2 is December, and then I add extra notes so I know what build number they are. And then in the description, because I don't keep track of the index numbers very well in my head, so I've made a note here to remind me what the indexes are. So to get that, what I do is I'll do get Windows image, and I point it at the install WIM, and that will then give me the list of the different indexes. And then I just populated this over here with that. And then to get the build number, I just pick the index that I typically use. I usually use Pro in my environment. And then once it's connected to my Intune environment, the licenses kick it over to Enterprise. But with Pro, it will auto activate because that's what my devices came with. And then I'll just grab this version number. And so when I add a new content, I like to then put the description with the version number and what month that was released, just to make it easier for keeping track. All right, so we're halfway there. So let's switch over to making an application here. All right, so we can also make different applications. We'll go ahead and make an application of the DeployR client. And purpose will be application, type will be folder, and open after creation. And let's see, actually, I'm going to switch to a different browser and I'll zoom in on that. Okay, so the last browser was local on my device, and I used that one for when I was going to upload the WIM because I already had it downloaded on that device. Almost all the time though, I'm remoted in, or I'm using just the web URL, and I'm actually normally just using it on my normal workstation instead of being RDP'd into the server. And then I have like a folder source in my own lab, which I use to keep track of everything. So we will go to content. And that's the other thing, like essentially I'm showing that multiple people can be working in the same console at the same time. Purpose, application, folder. All right, so then we'll do a new version. And at this point, you will put for an application, you put your install command line, and then you can also add a working directory. By default, it's going to set the working directory to the content location. And then you can add success codes. Certain applications might have additional success codes versus just 0 or 3010. By default, it will have those in there already, so you don't need to add those. But then we're going to come back over here. In our documentation, we have a page that talks about monitoring the task sequences. And to do that, you need the DeployR agent integrated in your boot media. And then and then in a full OS as well. So we have it documented here how to go ahead and install that. So this has the command line. I'm going to go ahead and copy that. Control C. Let's go back over and throw that in there. And all right, so then there's our command line. I don't need to do anything else for now. We'll save. And you can see then here, it shows the command line. I can pull back a little bit so you can see the whole thing. And then we're going to go ahead and upload content here. So I have my source, and then I organize it very much how I organize my stuff in Config Manager. And we'll go to the DeployR client. And now in this folder, I have, you will see 2 files. So I'll click upload. And I've got my 2 PS import file, which you'd create. So you'd have your agent deployed on a machine already. You go in, you set all your settings in the config editor, and then you export this file. And then when you're installing it, you would just point it at that file and it's going to apply all of your settings. I'll go ahead and click upload. So now this is uploading to my DeployR server, which is in Azure, pulling everything from my local environment here. And now that's done. It was pretty quick. I'm going to go ahead and just change this to active and hit save. So that where this is handy, and then in your task sequence, you can add the application, but you can also go into here, and I already have one set up, but you would pick your DeployR client, put it here, and the next time you generate your boot media, it's going to integrate that in so that you can start doing the reporting part of it. And inside of a task sequence, you'll be in the full operating system. You can add a application here. So we're going to go to install application. We'll pick version 1 here, and that will show up. Install application. We'll go ahead and pick an application. This is the one I just created. Select, and now it's here. Now, one thing you'll notice inside the task sequences is that these are actually links. So when you're there, you can also go ahead and right click, open in a new one, and it will pull up that application right away. So if you're ever like, oh, what application do I have here? It's really convenient to click around inside of the browser versus having to, in CM days, we had to go back out of the console, switch to a different node, try to find the application. From here, it's just a quick click. All right, let's create and live in. Okay. The next thing I wanted to go over was, so you've got your DeployR server, and you're like, I would like to create a task sequence. In CM, when you first create a task sequence, there's like 4 or 5 different options. So here we can go, you can either create a completely blank one, or you can grab one from a template. So there's already quite a few different templates pre-populated in here, and there's more coming all the time with new versions. We're gonna do Windows bare metal, or should we? Yeah, we'll do Windows bare metal for now. Go ahead and click clone. So the first time you launch this here, it's gonna be like, hey, there's this exclamation point because it needs content. So we're gonna go ahead and hit edit mode. We'll go find our content. So this is the one that I uploaded because I named it WIM. This is the one I have previously, and you can see my description is actually really helpful at this point because I know then what indexes I have. So I'm going to click this one here, and then I have the different versions. So eventually I'm going to go back in here and add version 3 with January's content. And then from looking at here, Pro I know is number 5. So I'm going to go here and set my index to 5 because I want Pro distributed. Now there's a few different continuation methods. Config Manager use setup complete, and that's what I'm most comfortable with. So I almost always use setup complete. MDT like to use the auto login, but we have different options, and these are explained a little bit more in the doc. So if you want, you can use different things. I pretty much always just go with setup complete. And then at this point, there's a couple other options. So if you're ending it where you're at the Ubi screen, for someone to like then go to log in for autopilot or create their account, you can have it set so it will disable the Shift F10 ability, and then also make it so that it requires internet. Those are just a couple extra features to help lock it down. Now, as Mike was talking about, when we create driver packs, it's very important to set those 2 different settings that are the manufacturer and the model. And because what we're doing here is do you remember in Config Manager where you'd have like 12, 15 driver packs, and then on each one you'd have a condition, which was the manufacturer and model, and then it would apply the correct driver pack. So what's happening in this situation here in DeployR, we have just one step, which is just called inject drivers. And what this step is doing is it's reading the information off of the device that's running the task sequence, and it's grabbing the make and the model information or the SKU information. Then it reaches back to the DeployR server and it reads through all those driver packs you've created. It first finds one that it matches the manufacturer, and then it will look through, and if there's a match on the model or the SKU, it will grab that one. Now, if you have two, like you have one that's in development and one that's production, it's going to default to production. If it doesn't find one that's production, it will default to in development, and then it will grab that, download it, and move ahead with it. So this task sequence, when it's done, it would actually be sitting at the login screen, but you can change that by setting different variables. If you want to reseal for autopilot, you can set variables for that, which we have a step here for configure initial variables. So we'll put that up front because they're initial. And so you can set your time zone, your bunch of the different system locations, but then for finish action, the default is doing nothing. So these are the same as what MDT options were. You can have it shut down the computer, reboot the computer. But now if you wanted to reseal it, and so that when it's done, it would switch over, people can put their autopilot information in, you can do that, or just have it log off. A lot of times, if this is for a domain join, I'll just do a reboot at the end. If I'm doing the autopilot, so we also have a step in here for registering with autopilot, which I end up using quite a bit to get things into my Intune lab here. So at this point, I have a group tag that's just called enterprise. And then when it gets to this point in the task sequence, it will go ahead and run the register with autopilot process. It would reach out to my tenant, register it, and then this adds a few minutes to the process. And then at the end, if I had set this guy to reseal for autopilot, when it's done, it's going to reboot. And then when it comes back up, it'll be at that autopilot screen showing your organization. All right, so let's go ahead and deploy boot options. So Mike mentioned that with DeployR, you can start the process several different ways, either through like the ISO or through Pixie. You can use the flash drive creating from the ISO as well. So I'm going to go ahead and start DeployR task sequence here. I'm just going to pull up my Hyper-V. Move that over here. All right, so we're going to, I'm actually going to Pixie boot. And oh, of course. Why? Huh. Okay. My device is wanting to use a lot of memory today. We're just going to knock that down. 965. Okay. Start. All right, here we go. So starting Pixie, booting into our iPixie, I need to use a pin. The default pin for 2Pixie product is 42, by the way, because that is the answer to everything. And we're going to go ahead and I'm going to boot up to my DeployR server that's in Azure. So this is pulling my WIM now. It will automatically pull stuff from peers once it's been deployed out in your environment. Every time you change your boot media, it has to regenerate that hash. So you might see like it's not getting any peering, but it will start to peer the second time. All right. And now I'll be loading up my DeployR boot image. There's different ways to secure DeployR. In this lab, I'm using Entra authentication. In my other lab, I'm just using a simple passcode. And all that is explained out in the docs, and I'll pull that up here in a moment. So it's loading up the DeployR session. It has the DeployR version up here, so you can tell which version of the software you're running. All right. Let me. Okay. Of course. All right, so now on my phone, I'm going to go ahead and type in 31 and approve. All right, there we go. So that's one way to control who has access to running a task sequence, is setting it behind auth. I'm going to go ahead and run my production task sequence that I use for pretty much everything in my lab, and including a lot of testing of different things. So you can have all this set for complete zero touch as well. In my lab, I created a front end because I wanted to be able to test several different options for changing the names. Yeah, I can test with a single task sequence, autopilot, or local work group, or enter join, or offline domain join. And then I'm setting this. So all I'm doing is creating these variables that then get fed into the process later, much like any front end would in MDT or Config Manager. And then I just have a little thing here to just give me some generic information. So I'm not going to set the computer name. I've got other processes later on that will go ahead and do that. But now we've kicked off the process, and in about 20-30 minutes, I'll have everything done where it's pulled down all my applications and it's pulling down all the content. So it's going to format my disk first, and then it's going to move some of the important things it needs from WinPE over into the formatted drive. And now it's calculating the hash for my 25H2. DeployR is built from the ground up using peer-to-peer technology. So if you've used the 2-point toolkit for Config Manager to get peering, you had to like do some things to add different features into WinPE to enable branch cache in PE. And it took a little bit extra work to get that all working now. DeployR, everything is peer-to-peer right in a box. You don't have to do extra steps. When you build your boot media through the console, it already has everything needed in there for doing peer-to-peer. So here you can see here that this WIM is 6.4 gigs, and it's pulling from peers here on my network a pretty high percentage of that right off the bat. So I don't have to worry about all this coming from Azure. It's pulling a good chunk of it from my local network. Now this will keep running for quite a while. Yeah. And so you've got DeployR, everything's going well. And you're at the point where it's like you finally hit a snag. So what do you guys do, right? We've created a script that helps to determine a bunch of the things that are going on. That for prereqs, we've had a lot of people missing the prereqs, which, you know what, I'm going to show you that right now. In DeployR, when you're setting it up, I'd recommend coming out here to the prereqs page. It does require Stifle R and the dashboard, as Mike alluded to, and that information is in the videos to go through. You don't have to do a whole lot of tuning on those. You just have to have them installed to get the requirements for it. I have not done anything on a 2019 server, but it will work. I've done all 2025 because I like to just start with the latest, and it's been working well in my labs for 2025. People often miss the .NET things or the PowerShell. They'll end up just grabbing the latest PowerShell 7.5 instead of 7.4, and that's caused some issues. I believe that there are actually newer versions of .NET now. I think they're up to .23, which you can go ahead and use as well. That is working fine. And then the other note was the ADK. When we first wrote the documentation, the 24H2 was the latest ADK, and that's what we recommend using. But however, since then, they've released a new ADK, the 26H1 ADK or the 28,000 ADK. I would highly recommend not using that. That's going to be one of the first things. If you are using it, we're going to tell you to switch if you're having any boot issues. Because there's issues with drivers in that, or how it loads drivers, like it doesn't load drivers. So I would highly recommend avoiding that at all costs. And I'm sure CM doesn't support that either yet. And then as Mike alluded to, your certificates, make sure you've got that figured out for HTTPS. The documentation here is really helpful. Mike also was showing the different content or the different step definitions. So we've got a page for all the different step definitions that will go into how they work and information behind it. And then we even have information for if you wanted to go a lot deeper, which we'll cover in another session, of how to use PowerShell to kind of look at these in more depth and how to even build your own step definitions. So the documentation's out there for that. Okay. But I was going to go to my server and show how to troubleshoot. Okay. So we've got out on GitHub. So if you go to the 2-pint GitHub and you go to the DeployR repo, the repo for DeployR, underneath that there's a troubleshooting section. Now here there's 2 different scripts, which I know you probably can't see, so I will do that. One that's called DeployR Troubleshooting and one for gathering logs. So if you need to send us the logs, you can first run this guy, which will generate all your logs, which I'll show in a moment. And then you can run this, which will grab all the event logs plus the other logs that you've created and put them in a zip file that you could send over to the support email address. So we're going to go and run this on a DeployR server. So DeployR Troubleshooting. Now I install VS Code and Git on everything. That's just part of my task sequence because I live in that world now. So I'm going to be running that in here. Let's see here how if I can. Well, I'm going to hit play and then I'll use good old Zoom it here once it's showing. So what the script is going to do is it's going to run through all the prereqs and then it's going to run through several other things, and I'll dig into that here in a second once it finishes. And it runs pretty quick. All right, so first, one. Oh, there we go. All right, so first is doing all the prerequisite applications. And if I didn't misspell anything, I'm apologies. Feel free to reach out. Brian Mason will gladly agree that my spelling and the way I use grammar is not always up to his standards. But this will rip through, which is why he fixes a lot of my MMS submissions for me. And I try to keep this updated with the latest prerequisites and then keep the documentation updated as well. So that will first run through the different prereqs, making sure you have those. And if you don't, it'll change it to red and cause some issues for you. We're also then checking for different of the server optional components that you need to have installed. It will check those. And then if you're using the dashboard and some of the things for IIS, it will check the different mine types and then even provide remediations for those if you don't have them added. Then we're going to go ahead and check the services and make sure that you've got the SQL Server and StifleR and DeployR services are running, and make sure that they are set to the correct start type. We're also going to be checking the certificates because we've gotten a lot of support calls about the certificates, and we just want to make sure that it's the certificates thumbprints are matching what's in the config editors. So we check all that and we pipe out all the different information so it's easy to see and correlate what they're running. So this script is pulling back a lot of information. It does a lot of even your SQL checks. It checks that, make sure that you've got your SQL string and make sure that it is accessible. We've had people install creating weird instance names, and then they didn't put the correct instance name in, and then they're wondering why it's showing like that it can't make a connection. So we've seen all sorts of interesting things that people have tried to do. And then it will run through and check all your different firewall ports. And then lastly, it's just checking to make sure that inside of StifleR itself that you've gone through and approved the DeployR. So that's the troubleshooting script. And what that did then is it went and it created this folder in your, whoever user's running the script, it will look for that person's account and then create this folder for downloads. In the downloads, it will create a troubleshooting folder, and it will start populating. So from today, what I just ran, it created output from those along with some other applications. So when you do reach out to support, attach this so we can kind of look for different things that might be helpful. All right, and with that, I've got my demos done. All right, and present some teams. Present. And other things that you can be doing then when you do have issues is so what do you do when things go wrong? We have the troubleshooting script that I showed. We have a knowledge base, different documentation. The YouTube videos are great. They'll walk you through step getting it set up. And then we have subreddits too. So feel free to use the forum and use the power of the community to help get through things. With that, we can start looking at Q&A.
All right, guys, that was awesome. Those are great demos. If you ask a question in the Q&A section of this, we absolutely will get you an answer. If you want to come off mute, do we have that set already? If you want to come off of mute, you can ask a question now, but there's only a few minutes left here. But for sure, if you ask in the Q&A, we will get those questions answered. Simming.
Hi, I put a question in the chat, but I don't think it got seen, and I don't think you would quite answer it. During the deployment matching for drivers, what if they've only got the system baseboard to differentiate the different types of devices? I've got a lot of custom hardware that hasn't got easy to read make and models.
Yeah, so the baseboard will typically show up as like the system SKU alias. So that's actually another little demo. Let me share. Go back to.
Okay, so that was what you were referring to when you're saying system SKU. I wasn't quite sure.
Yeah, so the system SKU is different for different models, so it's pulling back different information. But what we can do is it's documented where these variables are coming from. So if you go into our documentation and you go down the task sequence variables, and here we have a make alias, model alias, and system alias. So what's going to happen is it's going to read these different values in and set these different aliases. So on an HP, the system alias is going to be the baseboard product, right? Whereas like on a Dell, that system alias will be the SKU. So it's going to be a little bit different for each vendor, so that it can be generalized and used. So what if you have a device that's kind of non-conformed? What you can do is you can go ahead and look up and run. Now, so I cheat, and I've grabbed and made a little program that I run on my hardware to know what DeployR is going to do. So I just run this gather process, which is what DeployR runs. And if I do it right, it works. And if I do it wrong, it doesn't. So what I'm doing is I'm running this process on my local machine, so I can see when it's done. My model alias is going to be this. My system alias is going to be this. So then I can look at that and I can set this for the driver pack. So this code is basically the exact same process MDT used. And I just ended up throwing it on my GitHub. And so I just call this from my GitHub to scan the model. But what you could do is you could cheat and just use this. This will work from any computer in the world as long as you don't block GitHub, to pull back the information to see what DeployR would be pulling back. And if you can then look behind the scenes. If you don't trust me, which is totally cool, you can just go to my GitHub and see exactly what's running behind the scenes.
Excellent, thanks.
Yep.
Got time for at least another question if you'd like to ask. Don't be shy.
Can you
Put one
put
in
the
the Q&A.
script in the chat?
Sure. If you put them in the Q&A, we absolutely will follow up and we can look them up later on to see what we're missing.
Oh, okay. No, I was just wondering if, like what we currently do is we use a PowerShell script to find the make and model, which is not just used for the driver injection part. Later, when the full OS is up and running and we're installing other packages, there are certain models we have where you have to run the audio driver install setup exe. Otherwise, things don't quite work right. So the driver injection doesn't quite cover all cases for, it's the audio device on certain Lenovo laptops. So I use that identifier later to say, okay, if it's this model, we'll run the driver package for that, et cetera, et cetera. Does DeployR have that same kind of thing where I can basically inject, here's a variable to use as output from this PowerShell script I've run. You know how like you can set task sequence variables directly in MDT through a PowerShell? Like, is that same sort of thing here?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, we do support that. You can put any number of conditions on a step. You can do leverage the task sequence variables like Gary's showing right here, or you can write your own custom PowerShell script to put in
and throw it in this list. Okay, yeah.
Yep.
Right. So this is
Perfect.
another way to get that same information. You can just basically load up DeployR, start the process, and then go into PowerShell, and you can just get child item TSM :
Oh, it's even TSM.
and that,
nice.
yeah. So then it will pull up all the variables, so you can actually see like what it's being set to. So you can see like the system SKU is going to be set to on this one, the Microsoft. It's a VM, so it doesn't set a system SKU, but it's setting the make alias and things. So and we go into this more in future ones where we'll talk about setting conditions and things on the steps. But so I've got several things that I've only want running on a VM. So I set in my task sequence. Yeah. So like I've got different steps I want to run on a physical or a VM. So I just go in here, I say model alias equals virtual machine. And then for the physical, I say not equals. But you can do all sorts of things. And once you put a condition on it, it'll add this little icon. So I end up using this for quite a few different things, because like on VMs, I don't want it to do some of the different driver things. We did demo the driver, or we talked about the inject drivers. We also have an inject cloud drivers, which will do pretty much the exact same thing, other than instead of reaching into DeployR and pulling it down, it will reach out to the different OEMs, download the drivers, extract and apply during WinPE. So if you don't want to manage drivers, you don't need to.
Yeah, and we do have a whole webinar series planned where we're going to dig into, we have one dedicated for drivers. I think we have one dedicated for like advanced functionalities and step definitions. So yeah, be sure to check those out. With that, we should probably turn it back over to Brian, because we're just at the top of the hour here.
Yeah, that's about a wrap, guys. Those were great demos. And for those of you who are asking questions, those are great questions. This shows it's very complicated technology. You can get stuck in the mud pretty easily, but fortunately for you, you've got experts at 2Pint like Gary and Mike who can help you out. So watch for more videos in the future. They'll be coming quickly. Thanks for joining today.
Yeah, thank you.